When you think of Apple, you think of class, you think of high quality, you think of expense. So what happens when you go back 5 years when Apple released the iPhone 6S? Is this a phone you could have in 2020? Take a trip with me in this video and we'll find out. When you first get this phone, you realize it's built like a tank. Unlike other mid-range smartphones, this one has the Aluminium 7000 series, which Apple was really proud of 5 years ago. It still has those antenna lines at the back, which I really liked as a design choice by Apple, and it has that rose gold color. I think it comes from the pinkish type of rose color in the back of the phone, and those gold accents on the camera bump and the Apple logo. Next, we'll move up to the rest of the phone, which is pretty much the same. We've got the power button on the right. We've got the 12 megapixel camera at the back. We've got the volume rockers on the left and the signature mute button. And then we've got the 5 megapixel sensor at the front. And of course, the home button right at the bottom. We've got one speaker, a lightning port, and luckily enough, the headphone jack. Next up, we move to the screen, and I don't think I really have a problem with this one. It's a 1080p display, and sometimes I don't even realize it. It may wash out a few colors at some points, but it gets bright enough when I'm outside, the contrasts are good, and I think Apple really hit a home run with this one. It doesn't compare to the 90Hz displays that we're seeing today, but if you're just looking for a good screen, this is the one for you. Okay, I know a lot of you guys have been waiting for this one, but here it is. The first look at an iPhone 6S with iOS 14. As you can see here, I just have the beta version because we're waiting on the full version that should be released in September. Until then, let's look at what we can do. Well, first up, by long pressing the screen, you can edit it. As an avid Android user, this doesn't shock me much, but it looks really good. From here, I'm just gonna add a battery widget from where you can just see your battery percentage. They're in different sizes, but I think I'm just gonna pick the first one. And then when you do that, it just comes up on your home screen. You can hit the home button just to cancel the editing, and there you go. From there on, you can long press a widget to edit where you want to place it on your home screen. Next up is long pressing a widget. When you do that, you can go into the settings of that widget and set up what you want specifically. Now for this one, I'm going to use a weather app, and I'm going to set Nairobi as my hometown so that I can get the weather instantly when I unlock my phone. Next up, we're going to talk about that widget up there. It's the mega widget, as I like to call it, because it has all the widgets where you just swipe up and down to see all your information. Lastly, it's editing a widget and removing it from the home screen. Just long press, hit the X, delete, and you're done. Then of course you can still move around apps as you please. Next, we're gonna look at a new feature from Siri. Hey Siri, open Twitter. As you can see here, it doesn't take up the full screen like it used to before. Now it's just a small little bump at the bottom of the screen, and I think it looks fantastic. Open Apple Music. So apart from all these new features, Apple had its own niche when it came to the iPhone 6S, and that includes 3D Touch. So how this works is that when I long press an app, it gives me shortcuts to all the things I love doing within the app. Get it? So for example, if I was to use Twitter, I'll just long press the app, drag my finger down to new tweet, and voila, I'm tweeting. The same feature works when you long press a link or an image. So for example, I'll take this Gadgets Africa link, long press it, and it peeks into what is in the web page without me having to open it. I think that's pretty cool. Now, the unfortunate thing is that doesn't come with the new iPhones, so it'll just be for you iPhone 6 users. It still works when I use my camera, just long press on it, drag my finger down, and I'm taking a selfie. Another thing a lot of you could be missing is that fingerprint ID or home button, however you want to call it. And I know we want to take out the buttons from our phones, we want bigger screens, but this kind of security was pretty cool. Every time I used it, it worked. I registered 2 thumbs so that it could be easier whichever hand I used, and it still worked. There's a point I even tried it with a different finger, my index finger. It didn't work, sure enough, but when I went back to my thumb, security, check. And I think that's pretty cool. Now that we're done talking about the features of the phone, we can talk about what I loved about it, and what I hated about it. And all the love goes to the cameras. These cameras are pretty good. Personally, I can't believe that we had this kind of quality in 2015. They were definitely ahead of their time. It comes with a 5 megapixel camera at the front and a 12 megapixel camera at the back. These pixels might sound low to you since we now have about 108 megapixels on a camera, but that shouldn't scare you. The 12 megapixel sensor on the iPhone 6s is pretty good, and these photos speak for themselves. One thing I didn't like, however, about this is the fact that you have to go all the way back to the settings to be able to change your quality and frame rate per second for the video. Now, thankfully, it gives you up to 4K 120 FPS of video, and that takes up a lot of space if you don't have the space for it, but the quality is pretty good. So if you were gonna try out a good camera on a phone, I would really suggest this one. And now onto what I don't like about this phone, and that's the battery life. This phone is not technically at fault because it's really old. It's about 5 years because it was bought the year that it was announced, and it's been working ever since then. And it takes a huge toll on the battery life whenever I use it. I have to charge it probably every 3 to 6 hours depending on how much I use it. As you can see here, I'm going to check my battery capacity and it's at 72%. That means that that is the highest amount of battery charge that I can get from this phone. And being a person who uses a lot of social media and a lot of texting and calling and video calling, this takes a huge toll on the battery life. However, if you're going to buy a new iPhone 6s or a used iPhone 6s, you can always check the battery capacity before you purchase it just to make sure it's at least in the 90th percentile so that the phone can work as smoothly as you want it to. When it comes to the speakers on this phone, they're not so great either, and honestly I wouldn't use it. They're very tinny when it gets loud and the bass is really affected. However, it still has that headphone jack which I keep thinking about, but you can be the judge of this.
And thanks to depreciation, you can easily pick one up for around 60,000 Kenyan shillings. With me here is a 2017 MacBook Air with the classic logo that moved this from the newer ones, but if you're wondering whether it's still a worthy investment, then this video is for you. Let's talk about the design.
Last but not least, let's talk about the space on this phone. Currently, the one I have is 16 gigs with 5 gigs of iCloud storage and about 2 gigs of RAM. At the time, 5 years ago, that was a lot of space and no one really thought more of it. But now, looking at phones with 512 gigs of space, this does not compare. However, if you're a space junkie, you can still get a 64 or 128 gigabyte storage phone from any of the shops in Kenya right now. I finally got to the end of this video and I think this phone deserves a rating. And in terms of screen and display, it gets a 6 because I really mind those bezels. In terms of build, it gets an 8 because it's really hard to find a good phone with a good build. The battery gets a 3 from me because it's just terrible. The cameras get a 9 because they were definitely ahead of their time. The performance gets a 7 because currently Apple has the A13 Bionic and this one is using the A9, so it could be better. The user experience gets a 7 from me only because of that iOS 14 change. So technically that gives it about a 41 out of 60 on my rate card, and that's about 7 out of 10. And I don't think that's bad for a phone from 2015 in 2020. Is this a phone that you would get? Tell us in the comments below, like, share and subscribe. My name is Anthony Onamu and thank you. Signing off.